Today, I wanted to talk about the evolution of leadership. The way executives need to lead today has changed, and they have to be ready to kind of show their authentic voice and story so that they can connect and inspire their teams. That is how you're going to see greatness. Today, I'm going to be interviewing Sonya Shelton. She is the CEO of Executive Leadership Consulting. But before we get started, my name is Donna Peterson, and you are listening to the B2B Marketing Excellence Podcast. I go around the world to talk with leaders, to talk about their industry, to see what's working, what's not, so that you can get practical tips and tactics to implement today, and you can succeed faster. So let's jump in. Good afternoon, Sonya. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Yes, and I'm excited about talking to you because you're such an expert in this field of leadership. And as we talked when we started, it all trickles down from the top. You know, what your leaders are doing trickles down to all the different departments, whether it's marketing, sales, whatever the department is. And that's why you are a perfect person to talk about this.
Great. Thank you.
So my first question to you is, what makes the difference between an executive and a leader?
Yes, this is a great question, and a question I asked in my book called You're an Executive, but Are You a Leader? Because I recognize that leaders really kind of focus on their title sometimes, on how they're trying to motivate or drive performance within their organization as opposed to leadership. Right. And maybe they don't even understand what leadership is. Right. So starting with, the very foundational definition of leadership is are they following you? Mm-hmm. So if you're finding that your team isn't performing the way that you want, or they're not reaching their goals, they're struggling, or they're burned out trying to reach their goals, is taking a look at how are they following me? Mm-hmm. So it's really not leaning on your title to drive that performance, but more inspiring and empowering that performance through starting with your why, your purpose, and your purpose as a leader, your purpose as a company, and then connecting that to their purpose. So can you find out what their why is and then connect it to what they do? So when we talk about culture, we talk about it in terms of passion as opposed to engagement, right? So do they have passion for the company, and do they have passion for their role in that purpose, right? So they can really see how they're contributing and having meaning behind what they're doing.
Yeah, that's so important. And I started to smile because you mentioned why. And I'm a big fan of Simon Sinek, all his books about discover your why. And it was an aspect I didn't really dive into until I read those books. Why do I do what I do? And of course, most of us will say we do what we do because we need to make a living. Maybe we have people to support, but that's why we do it. We'll dig deeper.
Yeah.
Why? And I do this kind of 7 layers deep of digging to really find out what's your why. Why do you do what you do? But I have a question for you. So as an individual, if we go and we uncover our why, so you're a leader, you've uncovered why you do what you do, and that's a strong leverage that keeps you going. But how can you help your employees to dive deep like that? To dive deep to uncover what their why is?
Yeah, I think I love your process on going deep, and what research really shows is that the reason why it's hard to find your why is because it lives in the part of the brain that doesn't have language, in the limbic brain. And so that's why it's so hard to find it. And we, I think there's also a lot of misconceptions about why, right? So, some people will say, oh, my why is my family, or my faith, or because I want to change the world, right? But our why is more unique than that. You had a why before you had a family. You had a why before you had your company or your job or whatever it is that you think that you're making an impact in. And so we actually use a process called the why connection, which starts with a discovery tool that helps you, that asks a bunch of questions that gets underneath your conscious mind to really reveal what your why is. And so I used to think that my why was my work, right? To have the impact that I can have in organizations and helping leaders create high performing cultures and things like that. And then through this process, discovered that my why is a little, that's contributing to it, but it's really about impact. So for me, everything that I do has to have an impact. And whether it's in my personal life or my work life, it's the same. If I don't feel like I'm contributing in some way or being able to have an impact, I get really frustrated and not fulfilled. So that's my why. And someone else's why might be, that they like to challenge the status quo, right? So that they love to break the box and innovate and things like that. So it's really getting to, once you understand that for your team, then you know how they're motivated and how to what they love to do, right? And so then you can actually, we call it your superpower. You can actually leverage their superpower to really have them shine and do the best that they can do. So rather than focusing on their weaknesses or trying to build them into something they're not, like you talk about, it's about that authenticity, right? To really understand what motivates them, then you can really leverage that superpower in your company.
I was recently sitting down with a client and they're trying to figure out their team. And we were talking about attributes, like what are their strong attributes, which sounds very similar to what you're talking about. What moves you? What is that emotional side of you that gets you to do things? Also, what are you good at? Like you may not realize it, but maybe you're a great writer, or maybe you're a great presenter, or you just love to talk. As a child, I was like, and people were like, stop talking so much. Don't do this. Don't do that. And I think you're right. I think we had our whys probably back when we were born as children. And then the way things happen in our lives, they probably got suppressed. And now you need to go through this discovery of figuring out who you are and why you do what you do. Or maybe you need to make a change, right? You know what? Sometimes when you uncover your why, you might make some changes in your life too.
Yeah, absolutely. And it doesn't stop there, right? So it starts with why, as Simon Sinek says, right? But then it's also looking at how do you deliver on that why? What is that internal process that you go through? And then ultimately your what, which is what can other people expect from you? What do you ultimately deliver? And then when you put those together, that's why we call it the why connection, because it's about the integration of your why, your how, and your what working together. That's really going to create fulfillment and your personal superpower.
Yeah, it's going to give you fulfillment, but I believe it's also going to give you a direct path to achieving it, because there's a lot of people out there, as you're in jobs or maybe as you're leading, you're constantly just looking all over the place. With our media nowadays, you're always reading something new, like, oh, maybe I should be doing this. No, let's do this. Let's do this. And, it's easy to get caught up in the moment, but you're right. If you do this self-discovery of figuring out truly what's inside, what you're made of, what's your why, everything, you would get on that direct path leading you to success, really, because if you're doing all the things that line up, you would be successful.
Yeah, absolutely. And it actually, what I'm seeing a lot of in organizations is an increase in burnout and stress. So American Institute of Stress said that 94% of employees today are experiencing stress at work in an unhealthful way, right? So it's really creating that why and purpose behind what they're doing that's going to help to eliminate some of that burnout and help them focus on where they can really contribute, where they can really bring bring performance for the company, as opposed to, like you said, being distracted on all these different things and not really focusing on what's going to have the biggest impact on the business.
Yeah, you're right. Last year, I think it was almost a year ago, I went up to GE and I was speaking at their headquarters on that topic of burnout. And at the time, my speech was follow your heart.
Yeah.
And it was one of those where how it all started, it started with me, believe it or not, taking a yoga class. And as the instructor was doing it, she's like, open your heart, open your heart. And it was like things just started to click in my head. And I was like, oh.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that it is connected to that purpose and passion, which will get you through any challenge. Like when you have passion for something, then you have the energy that it's feeding you as opposed to taking energy away, right? So then you have that fuel to be able to break through challenges and to be able to get through tough times, and it doesn't feel as stressful, right?
Yeah, but I think one thing we should talk about, though, is when we talk about passion, I know myself, if people say, oh, well, Donna, are you working in your passion or working towards your passion? I'm like, I love to downhill ski, but I'm not working for a ski magazine. I'm not working for a ski company. I'm working for a marketing company. So they might say to you, well, then how do I bring my passion into the job I have right now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's connecting your purpose, your personal purpose, to the company's purpose, right? Mm-hmm. So is it always going to be fun? No. But but challenges, we can be passionate about challenges too, right? Mm-hmm. So I kind of equate it to change. Like when we're, some of the most stressful things in our life are like when we move into a new place or we get married or something like that. It's a big change. But we're so excited about it that we just ignore all of the difficulties, or we just like, it's worth it in the end, right? So it's the same thing having passion at work. It's not about it always being fun, like skiing. Yeah. It's more about, being able to rise to the challenge and use your superpower and have meaning behind what you're doing. And then like you're not going to let anything get in your way. You just break through the obstacles because you really see the vision of where we could be, and you want to see that come to life.
Yeah. I love that analogy. That one, I could see it right now. Like you have a house, but you're going to move because you want to go to that next house. But first you got to pack up everything, which, like you said, is a daunting task.
Right.
And you package everything up, but you know that there's that new house waiting for you. So you go through it.
Exactly.
Love that analogy. So then my question to you, do you think it's important, we're talking about leaders and working with their teams, but do you also feel it's important for leaders to show their teams about building relationships with each other, with vendors, with clients, as being a very important thing to do?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're not going to create, we say that before you can ever have a passionate culture, it all starts with the foundation of trust. Mm-hmm. So if you're not building trust, and I saw on LinkedIn the other day, somebody said, oh, all these coaches and consultants and leadership development people are saying, that you need to build trust, and that, they have trainings on building trust, and you just need to be trustworthy. But what I find is, yes, that's true. Yeah. But I find that leaders think of themselves as trustworthy, of course, right? Like we all think we're a trustworthy person, but building trust is work, right? It takes a second to break trust, and it takes all this time to build it, right? So if you're just saying, well, I'm just going to be a trustworthy person, and you're not taking the time to build those relationships and build that trust, whether you're talking about with your team, with your suppliers and vendors, with your customers and clients, whatever it is, if you don't have that relationship, then and that trust with them, then they're going to move on, whether they're going to, go work for another company or buy from another company. Either way, right? You're going to lose them if you don't have that relationship. And then it's also, as you know, in marketing, right? Like building that relationship eliminates questions of things like commoditizing or price or things like that, right? Like when you have when people are connected with your purpose and you have that trust with you, they want to preserve that relationship. And so they would rather, in some cases, even pay more to have that relationship than to go with something cheaper where they don't have that trust and relationship. So
I totally agree with that. World Innovators is a company. It's 42 years old. It's a family-owned company that my mother started. And some of our global alliances that she set up back then in 1980, we still have today. And there is that circle of trust. And you're right. If you don't have trust, it really comes down to more transactional. It comes down to the money aspect of it. And that is a really hard way to run a business, because it's like, I equate it to like kind of being a hamster on a wheel, because you are constantly going to have to be out there getting more and more clients, where if you spend the time, build those relationships, that's when people will stay with you year after year, and you'll just see your company just grow.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're even seeing, like, I'm sure you're seeing in the marketing world, where the younger generations, this is really important to them, right? So they want, not only do they want to work for companies that have a strong sense of purpose, but they want to buy from companies that have a strong sense of purpose. And so they'll actually, if they're looking at something on a shelf or they're making a buying decision, they'll actually pay more for something because they believe in that company and they believe in what that company is doing. So it's, I think leaders really need to be looking at this concept of purpose across their business to be able to remain competitive going forward with these younger generations.
You're absolutely right. Nowadays, I think probably we've all been burned at one time or another, buying something for a company or asking someone for their services, and they just didn't follow through. And we're all a little bit leery when we go to make purchases, so that's why we research it. We research what other people are saying about our product, but also going back to trust. If you as an employee see your boss or your leader be dishonest to a vendor or to a customer, don't we also say, aha, if they're not trustworthy here, how do I know that they're trustworthy to me? So it has to be across everything. You've got to build the relationships with those employees, the vendors, the customers, but you also have to instill that trust so that all of them want to stay with you year after year.
Yeah. And I think leaders don't always realize that everything that they're doing is being watched, right? So I often tell clients, like, you have your own personal TMZ following you around everywhere you go, watching what you're doing and scrutinizing everything that you're doing to see if it's consistent with what you're saying, right? So I had a client who was really focused on safety. And so it was like to the point you had to have lids on soup, lids on coffee cups, like really focused on safety. And I didn't work at the company. I was a consultant, and I wasn't in their cafeteria at the time when he got his soup without a lid. But I heard it within about 10 minutes of him walking out of the cafeteria without a lid on his soup, right? And something that he just forgot, that just spread like wildfire throughout the company, right? And that everything that you're doing is being watched.
Oh, that's what I say to companies when they're talking about their ESG initiatives. I know that is a big buzzword right now, and people are throwing things out there, but I'm like, you better walk the talk, because if you are not walking the talk and you're just blah, 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 but you're not following through, people are going to pick up on it. Employees, customers, everyone's going to say, well, look at that. They're not really green. They haven't diversified, whatever it might be. But you're right. They've got to walk the talk and do exactly what they're saying. Otherwise, you're going to hear about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Interesting. Well, as you know, we were talking about it. I'm in marketing, and marketing is changing at warp speed. But we're not the only industry that changes so quickly. How do organizations create a strong vision for the future as it keeps changing?
Yeah, I think it's really looking at starting with the purpose, and then where do we want to be long term,
Mm-hmm.
right? I think a lot of companies make the mistake of having their vision too small.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite examples of a vision, and the reason that it's one of my favorites is because it checks all the boxes for what I say about vision. We call it vision because we really need to see it, right? We have to be able to know what it looks like when we're there. So Microsoft's original vision was to have a computer on every desk running Microsoft software. Well, when they came up with that vision, there wasn't even a computer on every desk, right? So to have a vision looking that so far out, and then I don't know about you, but my computer runs Microsoft software, right? A lot of most computers do in some way.
Yeah.
So they reached their vision, but at the time it seemed impossible, right? So really setting that vision longer term, but making it super clear,
Yeah.
so everyone knows where you're going. And then, yeah, there might be times where a whole industry shifts, and what you thought, maybe computers become mobile phones, right? So then okay, well then what's our vision now? And coming back and revisiting it. It's also really important to make sure that everybody knows it and is focused on it, right? I think a lot of organizations, they put it on a slide, or they put it, if they have an office, they put it on the wall or something, and they just never talk about it again. Like they create it, but then they never talk about it again. But to really make it happen, everything that you do has to be moving in that direction.
Yeah.
All of your priorities are about how do we get to the vision. All of your celebrations are about steps we've taken towards the vision, right? And that's how you really can see it come to life.
It's wonderful. When I go into companies for the first time, and I don't just start talking about marketing, because you've got to talk about exactly the issues you're talking about. What is your mission here as a company? What are your whys? As individuals, what's the why? But also then what are your goals to get to the mission? And I agree with you. You've got to keep it visible. But like you said, it can't be on a wall, like behind a door, and you only see it if you open that door. It has to be front and center. And I work with a client right now, and he has his monthly team meetings. At the beginning of every team meeting, he says the mission. The mission is at the bottom of their emails. The mission is always listed somewhere within their publication, so that it's always top of mind of what their mission is. And then, like you said, it's so important to set up those goals. Like, how are you going to reach this mission or the vision that you're having? How are you going to achieve them? What goals do you have?
Yeah, absolutely. And leaders can test to see. A test that I do when I come into an organization is I'll just ask 5 random people that work for the company. So what's your purpose? What's your vision? And they don't have to, if they say it word for word, I get a little suspicious.
Yeah.
But if they say it in their own words, then I know they really own it, right? Mm-hmm. So even leaders can just test, like, what do you think our vision is? And just ask 5 people in the company and see what answers you get. And then if you get basically the same thing, but maybe in their own words, then you know they're getting it. And if you don't, then you know you have work to do.
That's interesting. That's another very good idea. I never thought of that about, if they put it into their own words, they're truly understanding it.
Mm-hmm.
That's very interesting. Well, I want to tell you, Sonya, I have really enjoyed our time today. I don't want to keep you much longer, but is there anything else you would like to tell our audience in regards to leadership and how more executives can become great leaders?
Yeah, absolutely. So we use a model called Red Thread Leadership. And it all starts with purpose, as I mentioned. And then we take that purpose and run the red thread through everything that you do as a company. So we call it the 5 Ps. So starting with your purpose, then creating your plan, which includes your vision, your strategy, your goals. Mm-hmm. Then once you have your plan, then you can look at your processes, empowering your team to say, do our processes actually match our purpose and our plan? And where can we potentially gain efficiencies, do things less expensive or faster or more effective? And then we look at the 4th P, which is positions. So who you have on your team, how you're organized, how decisions are made, is all part of positions and making sure everybody's in the right seat on the bus, right? And then finally, it's the fifth P is passion. So connecting all of that to their passion for the company and their passion for their role, and do you have that on a foundation of trust? So I'd love to share with your listeners. I have a masterclass on the 5 Ps in Red Thread Leadership that's free to download. You can just go to redthreadleadership.com and see how to apply it in your own organization, as well as case studies of other companies that have done it.
Oh, that's excellent. Matter of fact, I'll definitely, look it over and go through the course. But what I'll also do is I'll put it in the show notes for any of the listeners that are listening in today. It'll be in the show notes that you can pick it up, along with any other contact details for Sonya, so that you can reach out to her with any detailed questions you might have, so that we can all get on that path to just helping each other succeed.
Sounds great.
Sonya, thank you very much.
Thank you. Such a pleasure talking to you today.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the B2B Marketing Excellence Podcast. Please hit the subscribe button below so you don't miss our next episode. And in the meantime, if you'd like to talk to me, please feel free to send me an email to dpeterson@worldinnovators.com. Till next time, have a great day.